I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I'm going to be talking about a July 2020 Yale study that was done on psychological manipulation regarding the vaccine, what they call persuasive messaging. And this was not just to get people themselves to take the vaccine, but also to put pressure on their friends and their families and to have scorn and condemnation towards those who didn't. Now, I talk about this in my video that got removed by YouTube called How to Lie with Statistics on John Abramson. And that one I repackaged into another one called Domestic Truth Agents Unite. So at, I think, minute 21, I talk about this same study. But I want to go more in depth because I think that this is really important to what's going on and understanding how we've been so divided. So I'll look at that and some of the consequences. I'll also look at whether something similar is being done now with Ukraine. And then I'll end by looking at what can we do with this. Let's get started. When I first read about this study, it was on Children's Health Defense, the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. site. And I was wishing at the time that I had more details. I wanted to know exactly how these things were being phrased. Well, my wish was the command of the Naked Emperor, who writes the Naked Emperor's newsletter on Substack. The universe is shrinking, and the last little corner of the internet where real conversations and real journalism is going on seems to be Substack. There is no censorship, and there's a dialogue that is respectful for the most part. And in some cases, that's because people will only allow those to comment if they're paid subscribers. And Robert Malone is one of those. So I'll be getting more into that later. Now remember that this is in July 2020, at least 6 months before the first vaccines will come out. At that time, the authors were already looking for the vaccines to provide herd immunity. And so they make the assumption that these will be safe and effective and will form this herd immunity, but they also make the assumption that the basic message of telling people the science and providing proof of that isn't going to be enough. And so in their statements at the beginning, they say that they are having people encourage compliance, the pro-social behavior of getting the vaccine in order to protect the person who is encouraging that. And then they also say that it applies things like punishing those who are free riders, those who are just not going to get the vaccine themselves, but go along with the herd immunity and benefit from it without taking the risk. This was a large study where over 4,000 people were given either one of these messages or a placebo message about the effectiveness of bird feeders. So let's look at the first two messages, which were not very effective in changing someone's mind. The first message is the baseline, is saying the vaccine, it's safe, it's effective, it saves millions of lives. That didn't change someone's mind. The second was self-interest. You should get the vaccine because it will make you safer. You will be less likely to die, less likely to get sick. That didn't change people's minds. But then they brought in community interest, that you need to do this for the sake of others. And where it became really effective was when they added in guilt, embarrassment, and anger, where they said, how bad would you feel if you didn't get the vaccine and someone close to you died? And so getting that guilt, getting the how embarrassed would you be if you gave this to someone else, those were messages that made people stop and say, gee, I think maybe I should get the vaccine. And it also made them have more negative images of other people. But the message that really increased negative feelings towards those who did not get the vaccine when it was available was the not brave message. And this said, firefighters, soldiers, doctors, nurses, they're all putting themselves at risk in order to benefit others. But someone who doesn't get the vaccine when they could is not being brave. They're not being attractive and independent minded. They are being selfish and reckless because they're putting other people at risk for their own benefit. And so this is not something that they're doing that shows courage. If they had real courage, they would get the vaccine, and then they would not be putting others at risk. The other that really increased negative feelings was trust the science. And that said that scientists believe that when the vaccine's available, it's going to be the best way to stop the spread. And so those who are against it, they just are ignorant about science. They probably don't understand how viruses spread. That's how backwards they are. And so that one put in a lot of judgment about people who were against the vaccine for themselves being people who really just didn't understand basic things like how viruses spread. And then the last three messages talk about personal freedom, economic freedom, and community economic benefit. And they conflate the impact of things like the lockdowns with people who don't get vaccinated. So they say, look at the sacrifices people have made. Do you want them to have to keep that up? Look at how many people have lost their jobs, how many people have lost businesses, how many children are no longer going to school. And they take all of those, and instead of putting those on the policies that created them, instead they lay them at the door of the unvaccinated. Very clever. Then they took these messages in September of 2020 and did it again on a nationally representative sample. And at that point, they broke it into Republicans versus Democrats, men versus women, those who espouse liberty, risk takers. And they looked again at the fact that the community interest plus shame, plus embarrassment, if someone were to get it because of you, that increased the uptake for someone getting vaccinated by 27%. And you are not brave, you're really being selfish, that increased their desire to convince someone else to get vaccinated by 21%. So these have been messages that are ingrained in us. And it was found that the trust the science didn't really change the person's mind in terms of themselves, but it did change their negative feelings and their scorn of someone else. What have been some of the repercussions of this persuasive messaging? One of the places that there is really a very caring and tender community, I feel, that has grown has been on Robert Malone's comment section. And that is one of the ones where you need to be a paid subscriber. And so it keeps the community, I feel, more tight-knit. There was one article that he posted recently about the vaccine mandates, and one person responded and said, this hits very close to home, that her daughter's best friend was a beautiful 27-year-old, a new mom, had her master's in speech pathology, had gone out for a run, collapsed, and died. And she was saying, this is war now. This is not something that I can just keep being nice, keep responding to my nephew who says, oh, come celebrate the birth of our new baby, but make sure you're vaccinated. That our silence is something that has enabled these things to happen. And someone else responded and said, yes, I lost one of my dearest friends because her children said, we're worried about you, Mom. Let's all get the vaccine together. So there are things that are coming out again and again. I hear a friend who stopped by the liquor store, and she had been friends with the owner and hadn't seen him in a while. And she asked him how it was going. And he said, well, I don't think I've told you that my son died. He was 27. He had to get vaccinated because he was working within the school system. And that was something that he didn't survive. So these are people who have their own experience telling them what's true, and that we are in denial of that. I was reading somewhere that said, if you have survived this long without getting vaccinated, congratulations, you have resisted the most intense PSYOPs campaign ever in history. And I think there's truth to that. But I don't think it's over. I think it is staying, of course, in the vaccine mandate form, but also shifting to the war is good form. So I wonder when we'll find out what psychology experiments have been conducted in order to look at the persuasive messaging around Ukraine. The words "stand with Ukraine" are very interesting because Ukraine as one country, as one monolith, does not exist. Standing with Ukrainians may mean making sure that our country is not supplying weapons and funding to the neo-Nazis that are holding them and their president, Zelensky, hostage. And now the PSYOPs on Ukraine are reaching whole new levels. Matt Taibbi has an article called Give War a Chance, and in it he quotes Robert Kagan, the co-founder of the Project for a New American Century and Victoria Nuland's husband. And he has an article called The Price of Hegemony, where he compares the attack on Ukraine to the attack on Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And he says in both of those cases, they weren't entirely unprovoked. I mean, we were actually infiltrating Asia's space when they attacked with Pearl Harbor, and we were doing a lot of things in the Middle East that provoked the response of 9/11. And so in this case too, sure, we did a lot of things that are making that response from Putin happen, but now that we have, the only sane response is full commitment. So he ridicules the idea of being afraid of nuclear war, of saying, his nuclear weapons, they're not really that big, and we've been dealing with that threat for how long now, and it hasn't happened, so why should we cater to it now? If we cater to that threat, everyone's going to want to get nuclear weapons so that we also can't intimidate them. And I can't believe that he uses the word hegemony and comes right out and says, that's our goal. So I think we should be paying attention to those messages that say, if you're afraid of a silly old nuclear war, you're just not brave. You just are prioritizing your own fears over those people in Ukraine. I want to end with some advice for all of us, because I think we're in a very hard position. That persuasive messaging, it does hit home, and it hits home with people who are like the woman whose daughter's friend died, where you say, should I have done more? Was there more that I could have done? Could I have been less polite? And we can beat ourselves up for this, but things are happening so fast. I feel like you should let go of any sense of trying to accomplish things, because you are on a bullet train. We are all heading into a new place as an entire world, I feel, and as a new consciousness. And that's going to happen without us doing anything. So right now, I think the thing you need to do is be as kind as you can to yourself. First to yourself. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself psychologically, that you are pampering yourself, that you're insulating yourself and not putting yourself out there in confrontations that are just going to make you a target of that contempt that people have been trained in. So take care of yourself and be generous towards other people. Understand that they have been subjected to things that are really hard to resist. And they know that they're hard to resist because they tested that out and made sure that they were. So don't judge. Let other people have their ideas about what's happening and let them come to their own place with it just because they don't see it the same way at this point. If you'd like to get a better understanding of how they're doing what they're doing, I have one on Paul Kingsnorth called Are We Being Manipulated? And one that is called The Propaganda Playbook. And that is on another playlist that will delve into more things on media and censorship. And if you'd like to join my sweet little community, subscribe on YouTube, and this will be up on Substack. Thank you.